You've been told that shifting your reality requires complex rituals, endless meditation, vision boards, scripting, and 1,000 different methods that somehow never quite work the way they promise. But what if I told you that quantum shifting is actually stunningly simple? So simple that an entire industry has been built around complicating it to keep you dependent on their systems. Here's what's really happening. Every single day, you're already quantum shifting without even realizing it. When you walk into a room and instantly feel the energy change, when you think of someone and they text you minutes later, when you get that gut feeling about taking a different route home, and later discover you avoided an accident, you're experiencing natural quantum coherence. Your consciousness is interfacing with the quantum field in the most effortless way possible. But somewhere along the way, we've been convinced that this natural ability needs to be complicated, systematized, and monetized. We've been told we need special crystals, specific moon phases, elaborate visualization techniques, and hours of daily practice to access what's already our birthright. It's like being told you need a manual to breathe. The truth is, quantum shifting happens through embodiment, not effort. It happens when you align with the frequency of what you desire so naturally that it becomes who you are, not something you're trying to get. And this terrifies the people who profit from your confusion because embodied beings don't need to buy courses on how to be themselves. Let me share something that might shift everything for you right now. The quantum field doesn't respond to your techniques or your methods. It responds to your state of being. When you're in a state of natural coherence, when your heart and mind are aligned, when you're not grasping or forcing but simply being the version of yourself who already has what you desire, reality reshapes itself around you with zero effort. Think about the last time something amazing happened in your life without you trying to make it happen. Maybe you met someone incredible when you weren't looking for love. Maybe an opportunity appeared right when you had stopped desperately searching. Maybe money showed up exactly when you needed it, from a source you never expected. In those moments, you weren't using any manifestation technique. You were simply being yourself in a state of openness and trust. That's quantum shifting in its purest form. No complicated steps, no specific words to say, no particular way to sit or breathe or visualize. Just you, in alignment with your natural state of creative power, allowing reality to respond to your authentic frequency. But here's where it gets fascinating from a scientific perspective. Quantum physics shows us that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it actually collapses wave functions into specific outcomes. The observer effect isn't just some abstract concept in a laboratory. It's the mechanism by which your awareness literally selects which version of reality you experience from the infinite field of possibilities. Every moment, countless potential realities exist in superposition, waiting for consciousness to collapse them into experience. Your state of being, your emotional frequency, your beliefs about what's possible, these aren't just internal experiences. They're the quantum instructions you're broadcasting to the field about which reality you want to collapse into your experience. When you're in a state of lack, desperately trying to manifest something you don't have, you're broadcasting the frequency of not having it. The quantum field receives this signal and continues to deliver experiences that match that frequency. It's not being mean or testing you. It's simply responding to the information you're providing about your identity and expectations. But when you embody the frequency of already being the person who has what you desire, when you feel wealthy before the money appears, when you feel loved before the relationship manifests, when you feel successful before the achievement happens, you're giving the quantum field completely different information. You're broadcasting from the reality where you already have what you want, and the field responds by collapsing that version of reality into your experience. This is why all those complicated methods often fail. They keep you focused on the gap between where you are and where you want to be. They maintain the separation between current you and future you. They reinforce the story that you're lacking something and need to do specific things to get it. Every technique that makes you feel like you're working towards something keeps you in the frequency of not having it yet. Let me give you a practical example of how this works in everyday life. Imagine you're at a coffee shop and you're genuinely happy, feeling good about yourself, radiating authentic confidence and warmth. You're not trying to attract anything or anyone. You're just being yourself in a beautiful state. What happens? People are naturally drawn to you. Conversations flow effortlessly. Opportunities seem to appear out of nowhere. The barista might give you a free drink. Someone might offer you a job opportunity. A potential romantic connection might emerge. None of this happened because you used a manifestation technique. It happened because you were embodying a frequency that naturally attracts positive experiences. You were being the version of yourself who lives in a reality where good things happen easily and naturally. Now contrast that with going to the same coffee shop with the intention of manifesting something specific. You're trying to use visualization techniques while ordering your latte. You're affirming under your breath. You're looking around desperately for signs that your manifestation is working. What's your energy like in this scenario? Probably tense, forced, needy. And what kind of experiences does that energy tend to attract? Usually more reasons to feel tense and needy. This is the paradox that the manifestation industry doesn't want you to understand. The more you try to manifest, the more you reinforce the reality where you don't have what you want. The more techniques you use, the more you separate yourself from the natural state where quantum shifting happens effortlessly. Your subconscious mind is constantly broadcasting your true beliefs and expectations to the quantum field through what scientists call bioelectric coherence. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that's 60 times greater in amplitude than your brain and extends several feet beyond your body. This field carries information about your emotional state, your beliefs about yourself and reality, and your expectations about what's possible for you. When there's coherence between your heart and brain, when your thoughts and feelings are aligned, when you're not in internal conflict about what you want or whether you deserve it, your bioelectric field becomes incredibly powerful and clear in its communication with the quantum field. This is when reality starts shifting around you in ways that seem almost magical, but are actually the natural result of clear, coherent quantum communication. The ancient mystics understood this perfectly. They didn't have complicated manifestation techniques. They had practices designed to create inner coherence and alignment. They understood that when you're in harmony with yourself, you're automatically in harmony with the creative forces of the universe. They knew that the kingdom of heaven, the state where all things are possible, isn't somewhere you go, it's a frequency you embody. But here's what's been deliberately hidden from you. The simplicity of this process threatens entire industries built on your confusion and dependency. If you knew that quantum shifting was as natural as breathing, you wouldn't need to buy course after course promising to teach you the secret method that finally works. If you understood that you already have everything you need within you, you wouldn't keep searching outside yourself for the missing piece. So they've created a maze of complexity to keep you running in circles. They've convinced you that there are levels to unlock, initiations to complete, special knowledge to acquire. They've made you believe that some people have natural manifestation abilities, while others need to work harder and learn more techniques. It's all designed to keep you seeking instead of being, trying instead of allowing, efforting instead of embodying. The real secret isn't a technique or a method, it's remembering who you actually are. You're not a limited human trying to access cosmic power. You're consciousness itself, temporarily focused through a human experience, with infinite creative potential as your birthright. You don't need to learn how to quantum shift. You need to remember that you're already doing it constantly, and learn to do it consciously and intentionally. Every emotion you feel is quantum information. Every belief you hold is a quantum instruction. Every expectation you carry is a quantum program running in the background of your reality. When you understand this, you realize that changing your reality isn't about adding more techniques to your toolkit. It's about becoming aware of the quantum programs you're already running, and consciously choosing ones that align with the reality you prefer to experience. This is where most people get stuck, not because the process is complicated, but because they've been conditioned to believe it should be. They're looking for the complex solution to what is fundamentally a simple shift in identity and frequency. They're trying to manifest from their current identity, instead of embodying the identity of the person who already lives in their desired reality. Let me ask you something that might crack this whole thing open for you. In the reality where you already have everything you desire, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Not how you think you should feel, but how do you actually feel? What's your energy like? How do you move through your day? What kinds of thoughts naturally arise in your mind? What's your relationship with yourself like? How do you treat other people? What does abundance feel like in your body when it's just your normal state of being? These aren't visualization questions. These are identity questions. Because the person who already lives in your desired reality isn't trying to manifest anything. They're simply being themselves, and their reality naturally reflects their internal state of being. Here's what quantum physics has discovered that changes everything about how we understand reality creation. The quantum field exists in what scientists call a state of pure potentiality until consciousness collapses it into specific experiences. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. The field doesn't collapse based on what you want or what you're trying to create. It collapses based on what you expect and believe is normal for someone like you. Your subconscious mind is constantly scanning your environment and internal state to answer one fundamental question. What kind of reality does someone with my identity, beliefs, and emotional patterns typically experience? Then it broadcasts that information to the quantum field through your bioelectric signature, and reality organizes itself accordingly. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work. You can consciously think positive thoughts all day long, but if your subconscious identity is still programmed with limitations, lack, and unworthiness, that's the signal that gets broadcast to the quantum field. Your conscious mind might be affirming abundance, but your subconscious is saying, actually, people like me struggle with money, and the quantum field responds to the deeper, more consistent signal. But here's the beautiful thing about understanding this process. Once you realize that reality is constantly responding to your identity and expectations, you can begin to consciously embody the identity of someone who lives in your desired reality. Not as a technique or a method, but as a natural expression of who you're choosing to be. This is what I call quantum embodiment. It's not about pretending to be someone you're not or using affirmations to convince yourself of something that doesn't feel true. It's about recognizing that identity is fluid, that you get to choose who you are in each moment, and that the quantum field is always ready to reflect your new choices back to you as external experience. When you embody the frequency of someone who naturally attracts abundance, you don't need to use manifestation techniques to create money. Money becomes a natural byproduct of who you are. When you embody the frequency of someone who is deeply loved and valued, you don't need to manifest relationships. Beautiful connections flow to you effortlessly because that's what happens to someone with your frequency. The shift from trying to manifest to quantum embodiment is like the difference between trying to force a river to flow uphill and simply allowing yourself to flow downstream with the natural current of creation. One requires enormous effort and usually fails. The other requires relaxation into your natural power and works with the fundamental forces of the universe. So here's what really happens when you stop complicating this process and return to the elegant simplicity of quantum embodiment. First, you recognize that every moment is a choice point where you can decide who you want to be, not who you've been, not who others expect you to be, but who you authentically choose to be right now. Second, you start paying attention to the frequency you're broadcasting through your thoughts, emotions, and expectations. You become conscious of the quantum information you're sending to the field and begin to consciously choose signals that align with your desired reality. Third, you practice embodying the identity of someone who already lives in that reality, not as a performance or a technique, but as a genuine exploration of who you are when you're not limited by your past conditioning or current circumstances. And fourth, you learn to trust the quantum field's intelligence to handle the how and when, while you focus on maintaining the frequency of your desired reality. You stop micromanaging the universe and start collaborating with it. This is where quantum shifting becomes not just simple, but inevitable. Because when you're consistently embodying the frequency of your desired reality, the quantum field has no choice but to collapse experiences that match that frequency. It's not magic. It's quantum mechanics operating through consciousness. But let me tell you why this simplicity has been hidden from you and replaced with thousands of complicated methods that keep you spinning your wheels. The reason this elegant simplicity has been buried under layers of complexity is because there's an entire ecosystem that profits from your confusion. Think about it. If quantum shifting was taught as the natural, effortless process it actually is, what would happen to the thousands of courses, workshops, certifications, and coaching programs that promise to finally give you the missing piece? The manifestation industry has become a multi-billion-dollar machine that feeds on your sense of inadequacy. Every time a method doesn't work for you, instead of questioning the method, you're taught to question yourself. You're told you didn't do it right, you didn't believe hard enough, you had limiting beliefs that blocked your manifestation, or you need the advanced course to access the real secrets. This is psychological manipulation, designed to keep you as a perpetual student instead of recognizing yourself as the master you already are. Because here's what they don't want you to know. Every single person who has ever experienced what we call miraculous manifestation did it through embodiment, not technique. They became the person who naturally experiences those kinds of miracles. Look at anyone who seems to effortlessly attract success, love, abundance, or opportunities. Are they sitting around doing vision boards and scripting exercises all day? Or are they simply being themselves in such an authentic, confident way that reality can't help but respond to their frequency? They've learned to embody the identity of someone who lives in a reality where good things happen naturally. But the industry can't monetize your natural state of being, so they've created artificial scarcity around your own power. They've convinced you that accessing your birthright requires special training, secret knowledge, or years of practice. It's like convincing a bird that it needs to take flying lessons or pay for wing certification before it can leave the nest. The most insidious part is how they've weaponized quantum physics to make simple concepts sound impossibly complex. They throw around terms like quantum entanglement, dimensional shifting, and frequency calibration to make you feel like you need a PhD in physics to change your reality. But quantum mechanics, at its core, is describing something beautifully simple. Consciousness and reality are intimately connected, and your state of being influences what you experience. You don't need to understand the mathematical equations behind quantum field theory to quantum shift any more than you need to understand the biochemistry of digestion to eat a meal. Your consciousness already knows how to interface with the quantum field. It's been doing it since the moment you were born. Every time you've had an intuitive hit that turned out to be accurate, every time you felt someone staring at you and turned around to confirm it, every time you've known something was going to happen before it did, you were experiencing quantum coherence in action. The real question isn't how to access this ability. The real question is how to stop interfering with it. And this is where the complexity trap becomes most obvious. All those techniques and methods aren't connecting you to your natural power. They're actually creating interference patterns that block your natural quantum coherence. When you're trying to visualize while simultaneously worrying whether you're doing it right, you're creating internal conflict that disrupts your bioelectric field. When you're affirming abundance while feeling desperate about your financial situation, you're sending mixed signals to the quantum field. When you're following someone else's manifestation method instead of trusting your own inner guidance, you're disconnecting from your authentic frequency. This is why people often report that their biggest manifestations happened when they stopped trying so hard. They finally gave up on all the techniques, relaxed into just being themselves, and suddenly their reality shifted in ways they never expected. They accidentally stumbled back into their natural state of quantum coherence. But what if you didn't have to stumble? What if you could consciously return to this natural state whenever you wanted? This is what quantum embodiment is really about. It's not another technique to add to your collection. It's a return to the simplicity of being yourself so completely that reality has no choice but to reflect your authentic frequency back to you. Let me give you a deeper understanding of how this works at the quantum level. Because when you really get this, you'll never fall for complicated manifestation methods again. Every atom in your body is in constant communication with the quantum field through what physicists call zero-point energy fluctuations. This isn't metaphysical speculation. This is measurable science. Your thoughts create electromagnetic patterns in your brain. Your emotions generate biochemical cascades throughout your body. Your beliefs influence your nervous system's baseline state. All of this creates what researchers call your psychophysiological coherence pattern, which is essentially your unique quantum signature that's constantly being broadcast to the field. When this signature is coherent, when all your internal systems are aligned and working in harmony, you become what quantum physicists call a coherent quantum system. In this state, your ability to influence probability outcomes increases exponentially. You literally become more powerful at collapsing wave functions in your favor. But here's the crucial insight that changes everything. Coherence isn't something you create through effort. It's your natural state when you're not creating interference through internal conflict, resistance, or trying to be someone you're not. A tree doesn't try to be coherent. A river doesn't effort to flow. They simply express their nature, and coherence is the automatic result. The same is true for you. When you're being authentically yourself, when your thoughts, feelings, and actions are aligned, when you're not fighting against your natural impulses or trying to force outcomes, coherence happens automatically. And in that state, quantum shifting becomes as natural as breathing. This is why indigenous cultures, ancient mystics, and traditional shamans never had complicated manifestation techniques. They understood that reality responds to authenticity, to being in right relationship with yourself and the natural world. They knew that when you're aligned with your true nature, you're automatically aligned with the creative forces of the universe. But modern civilization has taught us to distrust our natural instincts, to override our authentic impulses, to become who we think we should be instead of who we actually are. We've been conditioned to believe that our natural state isn't good enough, that we need to improve ourselves, fix ourselves, or transform ourselves into someone worthy of our desires. This conditioning creates a fundamental split in our psyche that disrupts our quantum coherence. Part of us wants one thing while another part believes we don't deserve it. Part of us moves toward our dreams while another part sabotages our progress. Part of us believes in our power while another part feels helpless and small. These internal conflicts create what quantum physicists call decoherence, which dramatically reduces our ability to influence reality. The manifestation industry exploits this decoherence by offering you more things to do, more ways to improve yourself, more techniques to master. But adding more complexity to an already fragmented system only creates more decoherence. It's like trying to tune a radio by turning multiple dials at once. Instead of getting clearer reception, you create more static. The real solution is integration, not addition. It's about bringing all parts of yourself into alignment, not learning new methods. It's about healing the splits in your psyche that prevent natural coherence, not acquiring more manifestation tools. When you're internally integrated, when all parts of you are working together instead of against each other, your quantum signature becomes incredibly clear and powerful. You stop sending mixed messages to the field. Your bioelectric coherence increases. Your ability to collapse wave functions in your favor becomes almost supernatural, though it's actually completely natural. This is what happens to people who seem to have the Midas touch in business, or who attract amazing relationships effortlessly, or who always seem to be in the right place at the right time. They're not using secret manifestation techniques. They're simply internally coherent, authentically themselves, and naturally aligned with their desires. Their quantum signature is clear and consistent, so reality responds to them in clear and consistent ways. But achieving this coherence isn't about perfecting yourself or eliminating all your human flaws and contradictions. It's about accepting and integrating all aspects of who you are, including the parts you might prefer were different. Because here's what most people don't understand about quantum coherence. It's not about being perfect. It's about being whole. When you try to manifest from only your positive aspects while rejecting or hiding your shadow, you create internal fragmentation that disrupts your quantum field. The parts of you that you're trying to suppress don't disappear. They go underground and continue to broadcast their frequency from your subconscious, often directly contradicting what you're trying to consciously create. For example, if you're trying to manifest abundance while being ashamed of your desire for money, part of you is moving toward wealth while another part is pushing it away. If you're trying to attract love while believing you're not worthy of it, you're simultaneously calling in and repelling relationships. If you're working toward success while secretly fearing that you'll lose yourself if you become too powerful, you'll unconsciously sabotage your progress every time you get close to your goals. True quantum coherence requires radical self-acceptance. Not the kind of self-acceptance that says I'm perfect as I am and never need to grow, but the kind that says I'm human, I'm complex, I have light and shadow, strengths and weaknesses, and all of this is welcome in my quantum field. When you stop fighting against aspects of yourself and instead include them in your vision of who you're becoming, something magical happens. The energy you are using to maintain internal conflicts becomes available for creation. The parts of you that were working against your desires can be transformed into allies. Your quantum signature becomes integrated and powerful instead of fragmented and weak. This is why the most successful manifestors often have a quality of wholeness about them. They're not trying to be perfect or spiritual or positive all the time. They're simply authentically themselves, comfortable with their full range of human experience, and therefore able to bring all of their creative power to bear on their desires. Let me share a practical example of how this integration works in real life. Imagine you want to create more abundance, but you've always had conflicted feelings about money. Part of you desires financial freedom, while another part believes that wanting money is selfish or spiritual. People shouldn't care about material things. The traditional manifestation approach would try to eliminate the negative beliefs through affirmations, visualization, or energy clearing. But this creates an internal war between the part of you that wants money and the part that judges that desire. You end up spending more energy fighting yourself than creating what you want. The quantum embodiment approach is completely different. Instead of trying to eliminate the conflicted parts, you acknowledge them, understand their concerns, and find a way to honor both aspects of your nature. You might recognize that your resistance to money comes from a genuine desire to be a good person and contribute positively to the world. That's actually a beautiful quality that doesn't need to be eliminated. So instead of fighting this part of yourself, you integrate it into your vision of abundance. You embody the frequency of someone who has plenty of money and uses it in ways that align with their values. You become someone who is both financially successful and deeply ethical, both materially abundant and spiritually grounded. You stop seeing money and goodness as opposites and start seeing them as complementary aspects of a fully integrated life. When you embody this integrated frequency, your quantum signature becomes incredibly powerful because all parts of you are working together instead of against each other. You're not trying to manifest money while secretly believing it's wrong to want it. You're embodying the identity of someone who naturally attracts and uses money in beautiful, life-affirming ways. This same principle applies to every area of life. Want love but afraid of being hurt? Embody someone who is both open-hearted and wisely discerning. Want success but worried about becoming arrogant? Become someone who achieves great things while staying humble and connected to others. Want freedom but concerned about responsibility? Embody someone who creates freedom through conscious choice rather than avoidance. The key is always integration rather than elimination, wholeness rather than perfection, authenticity rather than performance. Because the quantum field doesn't respond to your mask or your spiritual persona or your positive thinking. It responds to your authentic frequency, which includes all aspects of who you are. This is why quantum shifting becomes so much simpler once you understand this principle. You stop trying to become someone else and start becoming more fully yourself. You stop fighting against your nature and start expressing it more authentically. You stop adding techniques and start removing the barriers to your natural creative power. And here's where it gets really interesting from a scientific perspective. Recent research in quantum biology has discovered that living systems, including human beings, maintain quantum coherence at much higher temperatures and in much more chaotic environments than anyone thought possible. This suggests that our bodies are literally designed to be quantum coherent systems. Your heart, your brain, your nervous system, even your DNA, all show evidence of quantum effects that persist at body temperature. This isn't some mystical concept. It's measurable biology. You are literally a walking quantum system, constantly interfacing with the quantum field through every cell in your body. But here's what's fascinating. This quantum coherence is strongest when you're in states of appreciation, love, compassion, and authentic joy. It's weakest when you're in states of fear, anger, resentment, or internal conflict. Your emotional state directly influences your quantum coherence, which directly influences your ability to collapse wave functions in your favor. This is why people often report that their best manifestations happen when they're feeling genuinely good, not when they're desperately trying to create something they don't have. Joy, gratitude, love, and appreciation aren't just nice feelings. They're quantum states that dramatically increase your creative power. But here's the trap that most people fall into. They try to generate these positive emotions as a manifestation technique. They force themselves to feel grateful or try to manufacture joy as a way to attract what they want. This creates the same kind of interference pattern that all force techniques create. Real quantum coherence comes from authentic emotional states, not manufactured ones. It comes from finding genuine reasons to appreciate your life as it is right now, not using appreciation as a tool to get something different. It comes from discovering authentic joy in simple moments, not forcing yourself to be happy so the universe will give you what you want. When you're authentically in a high coherence emotional state, manifestation happens naturally as a byproduct of who you're being. You're not trying to attract anything. You're simply being yourself in such a beautiful way that reality can't help but respond with beautiful experiences. This brings us to perhaps the most important insight about quantum shifting that the complicated methods completely miss. The goal isn't to get something you don't have. The goal is to become someone who naturally experiences the kind of reality you desire, and the fastest way to become that person isn't through techniques or methods. It's through embodying their frequency right now, regardless of your current circumstances. The person who lives in your desired reality doesn't spend their time trying to manifest. They spend their time being themselves, following their authentic impulses, trusting their intuition, and allowing their natural creative power to express through their choices and actions. They're not trying to quantum shift. They're simply living from their authentic frequency, and quantum shifting happens automatically as a result. So the question becomes, who would you be if you already lived in your desired reality? Not what would you do or have, but who would you be? How would you feel about yourself? How would you move through the world? What would your relationship with uncertainty be like? How would you handle challenges? What would your inner dialogue sound like? These aren't visualization questions. These are embodiment invitations. Because the moment you start being that person, you start broadcasting that frequency. And the moment you start broadcasting that frequency consistently, reality begins to reorganize itself to match. And the moment you start broadcasting that frequency consistently, reality begins to reorganize itself to match. But here's where most people get tripped up. Even when they understand the embodiment principle, they think embodiment means pretending or acting as if something is true when it doesn't feel true. They think it means putting on a performance or convincing themselves of something their body doesn't believe. Real embodiment is completely different. It's not about pretending you're wealthy when you're struggling financially. It's about finding the frequency of abundance that already exists within you right now and learning to live from that place. It's not about acting confident when you feel insecure. It's about discovering the authentic confidence that emerges when you stop trying to be someone you're not. Here's what I mean by this. Right now, regardless of your current circumstances, there are areas of your life where you already embody the frequencies you want to expand. Maybe you're naturally generous with your time, which is the same frequency as financial abundance. Maybe you're genuinely loving toward animals or children, which is the same frequency that attracts beautiful relationships. Maybe you're creative and innovative in your hobbies, which is the same frequency as professional success. The key to quantum embodiment is recognizing these existing frequencies and learning to extend them into other areas of your life. You're not trying to become someone completely different. You're expanding aspects of who you already are into fuller expression. This is why quantum shifting feels so natural when it happens authentically. You're not forcing yourself into a foreign frequency. You're allowing a frequency that's already part of your nature to become more prominent in your overall energetic signature. It's like turning up the volume on a song that was already playing softly in the background. When you approach embodiment this way, it doesn't feel fake or forced because you're working with your authentic nature rather than against it. You're not trying to convince yourself of something that doesn't feel true. You're discovering truths about yourself that were always there, but perhaps not fully activated. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Say you want to embody the frequency of someone who is financially abundant, but you currently struggle with money. Instead of trying to pretend you're rich or force yourself to feel wealthy when you don't, you look for places where the frequency of abundance already shows up in your life. Maybe you're abundant with your laughter, sharing it freely without worrying about running out. Maybe you're abundant with your creativity, generating ideas effortlessly without fear of depletion. Maybe you're abundant with your love for nature, feeling genuinely rich when you're surrounded by trees and sky. Maybe you're abundant with your curiosity, always having more questions and interests than time to explore them. These are all expressions of the same fundamental frequency that creates financial abundance. They're all ways of being that come from a sense of having plenty rather than not enough, of being naturally generative rather than constantly worried about scarcity, of trusting that there's always more available rather than needing to hoard what you have. When you recognize these existing patterns of abundance in your life and consciously appreciate them, something beautiful happens. Your nervous system starts to remember what abundance actually feels like in your body. Your quantum signature begins to shift from scarcity-based to abundance-based, not because you're pretending, but because you're acknowledging what's already true. Then from this authentic feeling of abundance, you can begin to extend that frequency into your relationship with money, not by forcing yourself to feel rich, but by bringing the same generous, trusting, naturally creative energy that you already embody in other areas into your financial life. This is quantum embodiment in action. You're not trying to become someone else. You're becoming more fully yourself by allowing your highest frequencies to express more completely across all areas of your life. The same principle applies to any frequency you want to embody. Want to attract love? Look for where you already express love naturally and effortlessly. Then extend that same quality into your relationship with yourself and your openness to romantic partnership. Want to embody success? Find areas where you already feel naturally accomplished and confident. Then bring that same energy to your professional goals. This approach works because it's based on expansion rather than transformation, on recognition rather than creation, on authenticity rather than performance. You're not trying to manufacture frequencies that are foreign to your nature. You're cultivating frequencies that are already part of who you are. And here's what happens when you embody frequencies authentically, rather than artificially. Your subconscious mind doesn't resist the change because it doesn't feel like change. It feels like coming home to yourself more fully. Your nervous system doesn't create stress responses because you're not asking it to maintain something that feels unnatural. Your quantum field becomes more coherent because all parts of you are aligned with this expansion. But there's another layer to this that most people miss. Even when they understand authentic embodiment, they think that once they identify their desired frequency and start embodying it more fully, they should see immediate external changes. When reality doesn't shift as quickly as they expect, they assume they're doing something wrong or need to try harder. This is where understanding quantum timing becomes crucial. The quantum field operates on what physicists call non-linear time. This means that the time between broadcasting a new frequency and seeing it reflected in your external reality isn't predictable or linear. Sometimes changes happen instantly. Sometimes they unfold over weeks, months, or even years. But here's what's always happening. Even when you can't see external changes yet, the moment you start authentically embodying a new frequency, you begin attracting quantum information that matches that frequency. This might show up as new ideas, sudden insights, unexpected opportunities, chance encounters, or intuitive impulses that guide you toward your desired reality. The key is learning to recognize and follow this quantum information, rather than waiting for your reality to magically transform without any action on your part. Quantum shifting isn't passive. It's a dynamic dance between embodying the frequency of your desired reality and taking inspired action from that frequency. When you're truly embodying abundance, for example, you don't just sit around waiting for money to appear. You start noticing opportunities that were always there but invisible to your scarcity-focused awareness. You get impulses to reach out to certain people, explore specific ideas, or take particular actions. You receive quantum information about how to move from your current reality toward your desired one. The difference is that these impulses and opportunities feel natural and exciting rather than forced or desperate. They arise from your embodied frequency rather than from your fear of not having what you want. They feel like authentic expressions of who you're becoming rather than strategies to get something you're lacking. This is why people who are naturally successful in any area of life seem to have such good instincts about what actions to take and when to take them. They're not following complicated strategies or forcing outcomes through willpower. They're embodying the frequency of success and following the quantum information that naturally arises from that state of being. They might not even realize they're doing this. They might just think they have good business instincts or natural relationship skills or lucky timing. But what's actually happening is that their embodied frequency is attracting quantum information that guides them toward experiences that match their energetic state. This is why quantum shifting ultimately becomes a way of life, rather than a technique you use to get specific things. When you understand that reality is constantly responding to your frequency, and that your frequency is constantly influenced by your choices about who to be in each moment, you realize that every moment is an opportunity to quantum shift. You stop thinking about manifestation as something you do occasionally when you want something specific. You start recognizing it as the continuous process by which your consciousness creates your experience. You begin to see every choice, every thought, every emotional response as an opportunity to embody the frequency of the reality you prefer to live in. This is when quantum shifting becomes truly effortless, not because you never take action, but because all your actions arise naturally from your embodied frequency, rather than from desperation, force, or complicated strategies. You're not trying to make things happen. You're simply being yourself so authentically that things happen naturally as a result. And this brings us full circle to why the manifestation industry works so hard to complicate this process. Because once you realize that quantum shifting is simply about being authentically yourself and following your natural impulses from that place of authenticity, you don't need their products anymore. You don't need their courses, their certifications, their advanced techniques, or their promises of secret knowledge. You realize that everything you need is already within you, that your natural state is already perfectly equipped for quantum shifting, and that the only thing standing between you and your desired reality is your willingness to be yourself completely and trust the intelligence of the quantum field to orchestrate the details. This is the ultimate threat to any industry built on your sense of inadequacy, because an empowered person who trusts their own inner guidance and natural creative abilities doesn't need to keep buying solutions to problems they don't actually have. So let me ask you something that might shift everything for you right now. What if you already have everything you need to quantum shift into your desired reality? What if the only thing you need to learn is how to stop interfering with your natural creative power? What if the secret isn't in some advanced technique you haven't discovered yet, but in the elegant simplicity of being yourself so completely that reality has no choice but to reflect your authentic frequency back to you? What if the reason quantum shifting has felt so complicated and elusive isn't because you're missing some crucial piece of information, but because you've been convinced that your natural state isn't powerful enough? What if the real revolution isn't learning new methods, but remembering who you actually are underneath all the conditioning that taught you to doubt your own creative power? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations to step out of the maze of complexity and into the simplicity of your own authentic power. Because once you make that shift, once you remember that you are the quantum field experiencing itself through human consciousness, everything changes. These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations to step out of the maze of complexity and into the simplicity of your own authentic power. Because once you make that shift, once you remember that you are the quantum field experiencing itself through human consciousness, everything changes. You stop being someone who tries to manifest and become someone who naturally creates. You stop seeking techniques and start trusting your instincts. You stop trying to get something from the universe and start recognizing yourself as the universe expressing through individual consciousness. You stop looking outside yourself for the missing piece and start embodying the wholeness that was never actually missing. This is the shift that the entire manifestation industry fears most. Not because they're evil or trying to harm you, but because their entire business model depends on you believing that you need something external to access your own power. The moment you realize that quantum shifting is your natural state, that reality is constantly responding to your frequency, and that embodiment is simply about being yourself completely, you graduate from student to master. And here's what happens when you make this shift. Life becomes an adventure rather than a struggle. Instead of trying to force outcomes, you start dancing with possibilities. Instead of desperately seeking signs that your manifestations are working, you start recognizing that everything is always working, that every experience is quantum information guiding you toward greater alignment with your authentic self. You begin to see that what you thought were failed manifestations were actually perfect redirections. What you interpreted as blocks were actually invitations to embody your desired frequency more authentically. What felt like delays were actually divine timing, allowing you to become the person who could handle your desires with wisdom and grace. The relationship between you and reality becomes collaborative rather than combative. You stop trying to manipulate the quantum field and start partnering with it. You realize that the field isn't something separate from you that you need to convince or persuade. You are the field, temporarily focused through human experience, creating reality through the simple act of being conscious. This is why quantum shifting ultimately isn't about getting what you want. It's about discovering who you are when you're not limited by the belief that you're separate from your creative power. It's about remembering that desire itself is the quantum field's way of calling you into fuller expression of your authentic nature. Every desire you've ever had, every dream that's captured your imagination, every vision that's made your heart race with possibility, these aren't random wants or needs. They're quantum information about who you're becoming, invitations from your future self to step into greater embodiment of your natural creative power. When you understand this, you realize that you don't have desires because you're lacking something. You have desires because you're expanding, because consciousness itself is always seeking fuller expression, because the quantum field is always calling you into more complete embodiment of your infinite potential. This completely transforms your relationship with wanting. Instead of feeling guilty about your desires or worried that wanting things makes you unspiritual, you recognize desire as sacred, as the universe's way of evolving through your individual experience. Your wants become prayers, your dreams become blueprints, your visions become quantum information about the reality you're being called to create. And from this understanding, embodiment becomes effortless. You're not trying to become someone worthy of your desires. You're recognizing that having the desire makes you inherently worthy of it. You're not trying to earn the right to your dreams. You're accepting that dreaming them makes them already yours in the quantum field, waiting only for you to embody the frequency of someone who lives in that reality. This is the simplicity that's been hidden beneath all the complexity. This is the truth that's been obscured by 1,000 different methods and techniques. Quantum shifting isn't complicated because it can't be simple. It's been made complicated because simple doesn't sell courses. But you don't need courses to remember who you are. You don't need certifications to access your birthright. You don't need anyone's permission to be yourself so completely that reality reshapes itself around your authentic frequency. Right now, in this moment, you have everything you need to quantum shift into any reality you desire. Not because I'm giving you some special technique or secret method, but because you've always had everything you need. You are everything you need. You are consciousness itself, temporarily focused through human experience, with infinite creative potential as your natural state. The only question is, are you ready to stop complicating what is fundamentally simple? Are you ready to stop seeking outside yourself for what can only be found within? Are you ready to stop trying to become someone else and start being yourself so completely that the universe has no choice but to mirror your authentic magnificence back to you in every area of your life? If something inside you is saying yes, if you feel that spark of recognition, that remembering of who you actually are, beneath all the conditioning and confusion, then hit that subscribe button, because this community is for people who are ready to step out of the maze of complexity and into the elegant simplicity of their own creative power. And drop one word in the comments that captures how this feels in your body right now. Not what you think about it, but what you feel, because that feeling is your quantum signature responding to truth, your authentic frequency recognizing itself, your natural creative power awakening from the sleep of believing it was complicated. You are not broken and don't need fixing. You are not lacking and don't need completing. You are not powerless and don't need empowering. You are consciousness itself, playing in the quantum field of infinite possibility, creating reality through the simple, elegant act of being authentically yourself. Welcome home to your own power. Welcome home to the simplicity that was never actually lost. Welcome home to the quantum shifter you've always been, even when you forgot how effortless it could be.